problem that we had was the issue of a public meeting and representation. And so that's what we were discussing, because you know, we did not know how many of you were coming and under, you know, kind of what pretense it was going to happen. And because we've got obligations and everybody, all the cities do, about the Open Public Meetings Act and how to interact with the public and notice. And because there was no notice, you know, there was no official notice from the Department of Commerce or the individual cities, this could not be technically an open public meeting, because, you know, that's very dodgy. So what we were discussing was how to move forward in terms of public representation and public being part of the process. So the summary is that each of the cities who are represented, you know, that are going to be working on the study, are going to appoint one person to be on a larger group to be a part of the process of developing statement/scope of work for the study. There will be the group that's primarily the cities and commerce are going to stay together to develop, you know, proposals for you all to look at and hash through at the same time that we're doing it. So this is going to move out. This is going to move the deadline of this thing out, but our legislative folks are going to help, you know, help with changing of the deadline. So the folks who are all the people who are up there that are representative of the cities are going to be eventually appointing or however one person to be a part of a larger group, a larger steering committee, and be a part of the process.
If the one person couldn't be there, would there be an alternate?
Yeah, we will make provision for that.
Yeah, and I want to say I'm sorry that you were down here so long and that took so long. I think first there was this whole issue of whether this was an open public meeting ability without the notice, and so there was legal advice being given. And in the process of how do we add that voice? And so there's two components, right? Each city will appoint someone through the process to participate. The second component is that there will be open public meetings in which Commerce will do minutes and post them in advance so that the public can come and observe and see the process.
Well, I think what we're up to.
I'm gonna interrupt you because I have somebody that's listening on the phone that couldn't be here. And so I'm gonna ask you to identify yourself, since I already know Gary already introduced himself.
Mark Barkley, Department of Commerce.
Okay.
Hi, Wellwood, Department of Commerce.
And another Mark McCaskill, also Department of Commerce.
So you're all here from the Department of Commerce for this meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the legislature has we're the end point of all of this, because the Department of Commerce is responsible for meeting whatever deadline is there, and also responsible for presenting the study to the legislature. So in the end, you know, it's on us, me, whoever else is working on this.
Right. And I've assured Commerce that with adding the public participation, which I think is critical, we can add time to the timeline to extend it, because it may take some time to get appointments and things up and running.
Okay, so while I have the Department of Commerce here, I'm just gonna speak collectively, and also because of who I've been speaking to on the phone. By its current design, it has become a corrupt process. We do not understand, when the Port of Seattle does not have any financial funding, how you allowed the port lobbyist to be on the steering committee and how you are recognizing him. The citizens wanted an independent study by the state to look out for the citizens. You now have, once again, the port has a seat at the table. The port is defining the scope of the study. The citizens are the only state stakeholder that have no potential conflict of interest. The entire meeting, till now, your whole body of work, it needs to stop, it needs to be scrubbed, and the whole process needs to be restarted. We are so upset, we will be writing the governor, CCing you, Gary, and the rest of you, and our state electives, of what a failure in process this has been, and how dishonest in its optics to the citizens.
And I guess what I would say to Sheila is, in all of you, is the reason we were up there that long was to get to where we are now, which is that it will be an open public meeting with public participation. And I wish that would have happened in 10 minutes.
And that's why we are so upset, because we have now sat down here for over
should be
an
upset.
hour and a half.
You should be.
And the port has a history of being barriers to justice, and they're pulling it again. They are not funding this study, but their grubby little paws are all over this study with the removal of quality of life and crime and putting back in their economic benefit, and it needs to stop.
Well, what I would tell you is we have put a break on the whole process and we are recalibrating it and expanding the advisory group to take on what you just talked about
But only one person per city, though.
per city, but it'll be an open public.
People will be able to see and hear what transpires is the
Yes.
thing. No, because the working group is designed, because there's no statement or scope of work that has been, established yet. It's still crude and in draft. Having too many people will not allow us to get work done. So there will be a larger group and then a smaller group to take care of administrative issues, and just work issues.
So you have a lobbyist there for the port who have redlined and taken out stuff that was in the original proviso that we all agreed to. And you're saying that it's in flux, but you're letting him redline
No.
it.
See, this is not legislation. This is a study. We're not.
Are you removing him from the steering committee?
We don't have the authority.
Who would have the authority to do that?
Well, the steering committee is being expanded, so there are community voices. I don't think we want to eliminate the port because we're going to have to move forward on a plan of mitigation and how to move forward. So we need the port at the table versus them trying to understand. Your worry is they won't be at the table and up front, right? They'll be working behind the scenes. We want them at the table, working with us collaboratively as we tackle these issues that are impacting our community. And that's the purpose of the study, and that's why we do have an independent body doing the study. And the community needs to be at the table, and we need to reboot and bring all these issues you talked about to the bigger steering committee.
So that actually, he should not be in that room right now. He has nothing to do with appointing citizens. He has nothing to do with how the cities are gonna allocate funds. The port lobbyists to date should not be a part of this.
Well, I think one thing about having the port in there is that sometimes we might need some information from it.
At this point, you
that
need
we
no
do not
information, with
have.
all due respect. At this point, the port provides you no information. The meetings to date have been about the allocation of funds to the cities. Port does not need to be there. The meetings to date now will be about what citizens representatives are gonna be at the table. The port does not to be there. We need the port lobbyists removed. If you want to soften the blow, if you will, on what it looks like to date, you will remove him.
Yes.
And then he will come back into the process after the whole committee has been seated.
I've seen lots of different steering committees, and lots of people give information to the steering committee, but they don't need to be on the steering committee to provide that information.
I mean, one thing that was suggested is having a port commissioner, which is an elected position, on it as well, to be considered, because that is elected.
And why are you saying no?
I'm saying no.
You, the port commissioner to be considered, you nod your head no?
Well,
Oh, they didn't vote
Anyway,
more elected
yeah.
officials, so I guess that did.
yeah, because we talked about whether
But
elected
it was
officials,
discussed.
the representative from the cities should be an elected official or just a citizen. I would say that just a
So they
citizen.
didn't want to add in.
So at least where it stands now is that each city will have a citizen representative, and the port asked to have a citizen representative also, just the same way as.
The port can't have a citizen representative. They can have a staff member, or they can have an elected, but nobody lives at the port.
Well,
They're not a lobbyist.
they're not going to be bringing in, maybe, I don't know.
Most likely a staff.
Probably, because there is the issue of data that they
Yeah.
have, that we don't have.
Yes.
So we can't exclude them because just technically, because they have data that is gonna be important to the consultant,
I'm
whoever is
sorry, but I
hiring.
don't trust the lobbyists to give you the data that you want. They're just gonna give you the data, like the economic data. They're not going to give you the number of complaints, the pollution, and other things.
But that is
Yeah.
public record.
But
That
Anyway,
is
somebody,
public.
Okay, so I'm actually going, because I'm actually gonna now thank our representatives for going to bat for the community, because it is clear the lines have been drawn and who is actually advocating for the citizens and who is not. So I look forward to us meeting again when it is open to the public and when we do have proper representation. But we still will be following up with the governor. This is as egregious as it gets. And you failed when you allowed the lobbyists at the very first meeting. And you have to recognize that. And I hope that you take that away and say, how can we do better by the citizens, the 200,000 citizens that are severely impacted. But I'm once again thank our two representatives for doing their job. And now I ask you to do the same.
Well, I need one thing that there were two sets of instructions that went to Commerce. One was the law, the proviso. The other was a letter sent to us by the legislature. And in both of those documents, the port is mentioned as being someone who should be at the table, or suggested to being at the table. So it wasn't something that I could just ignore, because it was it's in two documents. And so
for their data, we're splitting hairs. For their data, the port was to be at the table. When it was a closed door and it was about the finances, they didn't need to be there. Well, when it was about, we're splitting hairs now, and I hope that optically we can clear this up, that moving forward we can have a meaningful study, because that means a lot to a lot of people. You gentlemen probably aren't aware that we had a petition with 1,000 signatures. I maxed it out 1,000 and 260 meaningful comments. I could still be running that petition, and I'm sure I'd be getting a lot more. So there is a spotlight on this study, that you are here to study the impacts to the citizen, not the economic benefit of the port. We're all aware about the economic engine that they are. Okay, and so I'm gonna go ahead and end my comments by thanking my electeds for doing their job, and once again, I'm gonna ask you to do your job.
And Sheila, your voice has been critical from day one. We would have had the proviso without me being Olympia and all your work. I do want to also thank Commerce, because they were part of helping us reboot all this and helping us find a way to bring people to the table. So they were part of where we ended, and I just want you to know that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
One question is, in that proviso in there, in the state legislature, was there ever anything about citizens being participants in this process?
not specific.
And I guess I assumed it was because of the air quality, we built that in, and so had I done a clear job of that, Congress would have had clear marching orders.
Okay.
So, but they met with me, and they're helping us make sure the group has that and rectify it. So I thank them, because it wasn't explicit in the proviso.
Okay.
Well, in one way, I'm glad you're here, because you're hearing how upset we are. And it's not a small thing you're doing, and I'm new to the process, and I was actually shocked. I thought this was council from like the city or something. I didn't know you were Washington State Council, and I thought, oh my God, they're really kind of high up there, and they're not thinking about the citizens. You're not?
No,
Well, it
no,
seems like.
no, we absolutely want to hear from each and every one of you.
I appreciate you sitting here listening to us now.
Well, I guess there's a couple of components that we want to ensure, and so when meeting with Representative Orwell, one thing that I took away from our initial meetings, we've been meeting on this for about a week or plus now, was the intent of citizen participation up front and early. But we were absolutely, as part of the consultant's work, would have built in, or we will build in, requirements under that contract to have citizen outreach and citizen participation. So it will be part of the scope of work. It will be part of the contract. And we'll build in milestones. There'll be meetings built in that will be part of the contractor's work to deliver information.
Can you guarantee that you'll build that in
I will.
without delaying the process?
As best as I can guarantee, Mark Barkley says yes. That's part of any work that we do, is to ensure that our contractor is hearing you know, and that's part of this work, is hearing from the people.
And so
we
I
absolutely get
appreciate that, but the proviso, just to be clear, because the proviso did state any citizens were allowed, the proviso also did not have the port in it until the port started lobbying behind closed doors. And I know Gary knows this because I explained this to him. Not only did I circulate a petition, I'm just filling you in on the background, not only did I circulate a petition, I also went to the Port of Commissioners in public, I can send you the film, and I testified to ask them to not shape or skew or interfere with the process at all, that we needed an independent study, independent of their influence, independent of their money. The whole time I'm given assurances from the Port Commissioner President Courtney Gregoire. She wrote me a 2-page letter in detail that they will remain neutral and not interfere with this proviso. The whole time that is going on, via records request, we got the red line version of what the lobbyist was doing. So the whole essence of trust was lost. And it always falls with the Port of Seattle. And we need you to remain neutral and not accountable to the Port of Seattle. And as I said, just as we the citizens were not in the proviso, nor was the port, and yet they managed to get themselves in and have been in now since the beginning.
Well, the port was in, it was stated in the letter that was separate from the proviso. So that was just
I understand.
Technical detail. So you know, but I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. I just need you to hear it. And those are the facts. This isn't my opinion. These are just the facts to date.
What are the criteria for the citizens who are going to?
Well, the cities are going to, through their own process, pick someone to be involved. We're not going to dictate to them how they do or don't pick you. And then after that, there's going to, we have a draft charter, and we've got a draft charter that will dictate the behavior of the group, how it will function, and also have the schedule about what we're going to produce. So, you know, nothing is a done deal. Yeah, and the charter, because the charter will be signed. So if you're on this group, you're going to sign the charter, and as an agreement as to how things are going to function. The ports, all things being equal, will sign the charter in agreement to how things are going to function. So there won't be, from my perspective, there's not going to be any bias or leaning toward one way or the other, because this is an advisory group, and in the end, I'm on the hook for the study.
Okay, so just to be clear, the citizens reps will be in all of those stages, including the design of this charter?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, and we have a draft charter that will be at that first meeting that people will take a look at and finish off.
Okay.
Because once it's finished off, you'll be signing it.
Gary, thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you for your interest. I mean, we're here for you. We all live in this state too, and I'm nowhere close. I live in a little town of Rainier outside of Olympia. I don't get the airplanes, but they do fly over my house 30,000 feet, so I get it. I have relatives that live here and are directly under the flight path, so I understand the concern. And our charter to you is to be good stewards of the state resources.
Thank you.
And to
Thank
make
you
sure
very
the
much,
dollars
because
are
that's
spent.
not words we hear very often.
So that's why we're here, and to be, as best as we can, we live in this state, but we are neutral arbiters. I mean, work for the governor, but definitely advice from the legislature. So we're here for you though. So if someone would like my business card, I'm happy to offer it up to any of you on the way out.
So just one little technicality, I want to make sure. Are we being presented a final charter, the citizens, or will that citizen rep be a part of the formation of the charter?
There's a
It's been a rough draft, but there'll be a finalization and then approval.
And so the citizen
So
that's
it
been
can still
seated
be-
from their city
Right.
will be part of the finalization and approval
Right.
process.
There's a draft there now, and you're going to, when you get it, you'll be doing surgery on it, and then once everyone's happy with it, you sign on the dotted line.
The calendar, because of some of the things that we're doing, might adjust a little bit in the next month or so. So as we work with it and advise them on how the schedule might adjust, the charter will stay, but the milestones might adjust a little bit based on some timing.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all of you coming down collectively and addressing this.
That's another question about what format was the notice for this meeting given? All I saw was from the Queen.
That's where we fumbled the football.
So
Absolutely.
what was the format?
We did not format this meeting as a public meeting, and that was our issue for today. Was we did not do that properly.
Right, because there should have been, I mean, it would have had to have been in newspapers to formally as a public notice and public meeting. That's why this is kind of so quirky, because it wasn't I mean, someone got notice out to you, but that was not a formal public meeting notice that either Commerce or the cities put together. That's why this has kind of been so quirky and jerky.
So we'll do that properly.
I took the afternoon off today, so I mean, a lot of people are here on their own free time. Others are being paid to be here. I took vacation time. I'm a professional economist, by the way. And so it would be nice to know if and it's cost me a lot of money to come here.
We will do
Right.
that.
So I would
next
appreciate it
meeting.
if things were done in a more reliable manner, shall we put it, to echo something that's been said here.
And for future reference, you should, when something is if something is said to be a public meeting and it's not in a newspaper, it's not an official public meeting.
Unfortunately, we don't have a community newspaper, and not everybody subscribes to the Seattle Times.
Okay.
We're actually a poor community.
Okay.
So if we were to poll who subscribes to the Seattle Times, it would be very glaring
Right.
how much poverty is in our area, and you will discover relates back to living in the belly of an airport.
Yeah, at least even if it's not in the newspaper, you will receive notice through your maybe the representative for your city. The notice will be out.
Okay.
So all future meetings will be public meetings? Or are you still going to have closed, non-public meetings?
Yes, we'll need to have business meetings, again, just to go through the mechanics of crafting a contract itself, as you talked about, finance and accounting type of issues that we might have. The city managers and Commerce will work together on those type of mechanisms to make that work.
And we will make sure that the port lobbyist is not in those meetings, correct? Who do we go to make sure that doesn't happen anymore?
The port lobbyist is part of those meetings. That's the administration.
But he should not be part of those meetings.
But here's the place where the port and probably the cities would not be part of is when the contractors, when the RFP is chosen, when the contractor is chosen. So that would be a Commerce process exclusively. Determining what the contractor will and will not do, determining the RFP or RFQ, however we're going to try to attract the contractors to bid. That's an open, that's open, but actual choice of the contractor and that's a closed process in the port.
But that's Commerce only and
Yes,
city
that's
managers. And won't the citizen that is on that committee also be a part of it?
You will have constructed the scope or the statement of work that the contractor is going to follow.
But only Commerce does that.
Oh, okay.
Only
So then the
Commerce.
port will not be in that meeting?
No.
But what this gentleman said is there will be executive private meetings with just the city managers to discuss funding. Now, as I understand that portion is done. So what I am saying is any closed door meeting that are to talk about, say, who they're appointing from their city or finance, the Port of Seattle does not need to be in that meeting. It's as simple as that. They're not participating in the finance. They are not electing a citizen for somebody that lives at the port. So we have to be very defined in their role. And I'm saying this because of the optics, and I would think the port would want this too. So who do we go to make sure that they are not included in certain meetings that just pertain to the cities and the Department of Commerce?
That's a good question.
You can get back to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
As it was iterated before, I don't want us to confuse two things. Each of the cities will have their own separate process that doesn't involve us for selecting and nominating the person. One city said, for example, what they do is they have a vetting process and then city council selects the citizen. So that's not something that we're involved with. That's each city on its own will have its own process for selecting citizens.
Just for kind of a little background on the financing of this. So in the legislature, the proviso was for 300,000 commerce to be matched by the cities. And so just to let you know that Sea-Tac, Burien, I believe Sea-Tac, Burien, ourselves, Des Moines and Normandy Park have approved or are in the imminent process of approving the interlocal agreement that commits resources to this. And Tukwila, I believe, will be bringing theirs forward, and I'll let Yarden speak for Federal Way. But at any rate, just so you know, that the city's responsibilities to participate in this by at least 4 of the cities has been established already.
We have a Federal Way. I mean, we actually were scheduling it for our city council meeting on Tuesday. Although what I was directed by our mayor is to make sure that the original proviso language of quality of life in particular remained in the statement of work, the scope, or whatever you want to call it. And that if not, that he may consider recommending not participating if that's not there. So what happened as a result of the meeting today, it's sort of a more, we don't know what's happening because the Sea-Tac city manager in particular had said that in order to have a public process of each entity naming a constituent, that for them at least would be a fairly lengthy public process, which would be maybe 2 or 3 months until they get to that point. So I don't even know when we're meeting again in terms of this. And in addition, and I don't know what's going to be decided. I also don't know if, when it comes to January, the original idea that the original idea with the letter that was sent by the chairman of the 2 committees to Commerce was a language that was different than the original proviso, as you know. So that is language that, in my guess, is going to, there would be some pressure to possibly change that legally, because so far my understanding is that Commerce has been advised that legally they have to follow the original proviso to some extent, but that could change if the legislation changes. So that's where I said that in the meeting I said that I would possibly be recommending to the mayor that we postpone any vote on participating until we figure out what's happening, making sure that that we don't end up having the wool pulled from under us. I mean, and I would also say that my understanding of what we decided, a couple things, was that each city can name a community rep, but we also, I think, basically said every entity could, so the port could also name a community rep, I believe. I mean, because everyone can. So, I mean, they are a public organization. Secondly, my understanding was that there would be an administrative group that would meet before each meeting that would be dealing with, like you said, the administrative things, actual contracts, requests for proposals, and so on and so forth, and that group would consist only of basically the group as it's been up to now, which is the city manager, city reps, I mean, people like myself that are like the mayor system, city managers and the port lobbyists. So I think my understanding from what your question, Sheila, was that there'll be a larger group that will have a community person from each city, and then a smaller group that would deal only with administrative things that would involve the city managers plus the port lobbyists. That's my understanding.
Right, and I think Sheila raises an interesting point, since they're not a funder.
If a citizen rep is not present, the port should not be present. It is simple as that. Yeah. And I hope there is not a delay, because I believe a delay will kill this, because the port is that strong and their influence. You have to remember there was a lot more of a dollar asked from the state, and we got the lesser. So I would really encourage any city that thinks it's going to take 3 months to cite their citizen rep to think again. And to move forward and to vote to fund this, and to vote to put in somebody from your Citizens and Aviation Committee. Everybody has one except for the city of Normandy Park, that they have other people that are involved, and the city of Tukwila, again, they have other citizens that are involved, and I would hope and trust that you do your job and get this going, and do not put it up to where it can go into the next session.
Yeah, I need to regroup with the mayor, he's the decider in terms of presenting it to council, the ultimate decider. Secondly, I want to consult with our airport committee to see what they think in terms of when this is a work at this point, we don't know. But, you know, I basically agree with you what you're saying. I mean, we just want to make sure that this isn't going to go in the direction of being completely controlled by the board. That's the only issue that I was concerned with. But I can discuss it with the mayor, and then ultimately also I'd like to get some advice from our airport committee. And right now it is scheduled to be voted on next Tuesday. So on our system.
Okay. Thank you, Gordon.
I just wanted to ask an off-the-wall question. Probably nobody can get more upset than they already are. So who decides whether or not we're gonna have another airport? You can't keep adding more and more things to the current airport. The footprint's too small. I mean, how does that get decided? Does the Commerce Department do that? Ford said that they don't do that. Port representatives said that they don't do that. So who decides that?
We don't, that's a good question. We don't make that decision.
So who does? You know?
No, if the Department of Aviation.
That's probably a little bit, we could look into that for you.
I can sort of answer the question. The Puget Sound Regional Council is doing a study also that's funded by the FAA for $1 million. It's supposed to be looking at the current baseline and what the future projected needs are. It's not a siting study, they made that very clear. But when they finish the study, which is due to be finished the same time as this one, December of 2019, they will present their findings to the legislature and the governor, and they've said that it'll be ultimately up to the state legislature and the governor to determine if they need to site a new airport.
I wanted to say one other thing is the other reason that we end up being angry is because we feel like what's happening now with the airport and the flights going over our houses, we were never consulted. It was just dropped on us. And so we have no trust for any organization.
Yeah, what she's saying is that basically, you do realize the airport has been growing since 2012 without any IS, without any telling the communities, we are gonna add, this many more flights, and guess what, now we're going into an expansion, but they have added flights since 2012, they added Delta's hubbing. I mean, they continue to grow before announcing there's actually gonna be 97,000 flights. They're continuing they're over capacity. And so there's a lot of issues. It all circles back to the port. So my only hope for the Department of Commerce is that you be meaningful in what you just said and you be true in what you said, and that is you are an independent study, because we need an independent study. It'd be a lot easier to cave to the port because we would have had a higher dollar amount. We know that 600,000 is not, it is not very much money at all. You're gonna burn through that so fast.
Yeah, we can promise you that we're not going to cave to anyone. This is supposed to be objective and independent. So we're going to do our job. We're going to, whatever any of the committees are advisory to us, decision is going to be made in to provide an objective study and results.
I think it's very telling also that who of the city managers came down to join their citizens. And I'm just gonna say that because we're on film, and it's very telling who stayed up. And that has nothing to do with you, but you can see that we're very fragmented. And again, it all traces back to the influence of the board. So I'm actually done.
I'd like to just say this. You said that Department of Commerce, you represent the state of Washington. Well, it's in the best interest of so many other cities in the state to have another airport, to have a big airport like Sea-Tac. Other cities need the business, the income there. You have to look at the other cities too.
All right. I want to follow on just quickly on what Sheila mentioned, that it seems like now that the public engagement portion of this is being tacked on. Sheila appropriately noted, and I've been a consultant for many years, 600,000 ain't gonna get it, guys. $1 million was kind of light. If the more that's carved out of that 600 that does not go to the substantive part of the study, which is study impacts, the less quality you get out of it. So I would hope that whatever public participation efforts are done are funded out of a different pot.
Well, the original, what we had originally talked about was that each city who was represented would have their own public involvement process. And then toward the end, Commerce was going to have its own public involvement process. You know, at the end, when there was a product, a more polished product that needed to go out for public comments. So that was what we had originally talked about, and I think that was what was in the schedule and in the draft charter.
Yes.
But obviously that can be revisited. So and in the light of you're exactly right. You know, that type of money it will evaporate. You know, if we have to do that. So we may indeed have to be creative in how public involvement is done in terms of funding. Because if the cities can augment and help out with the